All right, AP World, we are going to try the impossible. Let's see if I can cover Europe in 30 minutes here or less. Haha, less. For whatever reason, the CED College Board, Europe being Europe, decides to just dump all kinds of attention on them in this last full section of Unit 1. So strap in, all right, and here we go. Here we go. Okay, so we'll get it going here. There we go. With, yes, our developments in Europe, section 6. And we're going to focus in on 5th and 6th centuries to at least begin with in Europe, what is known as the medieval period. Sometimes you'll also bump into references to it as the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, all of that. And really what we're talking about here is the chunk of time after the fall of the Roman Empire, okay? And it's a long chunk of time. And what we see happen in Europe after the Roman Empire collapses is that you have what we call a power vacuum in Europe. In other words, no one really steps forward to say, you know, hey, we're going to take their place. And you end up with a whole series of a lot of smaller kingdoms that form up all over Europe. We're thinking about, you know, the map of Europe that really doesn't look like much of the map that we recognize nowadays. And so just all of these little kingdoms, some of them that war with each other, you know, competition for land, for power, those kinds of things. The Roman Church, Catholic Roman Church, still remains and still has a fair amount of influence. But again, the Roman Empire, poof, it's gone. Okay. And we're just also going to see everything in Europe just kind of go downhill. This is where Europe becomes like this backwater, while other parts of the world, like, you know, Dar al-Islam, the Song dynasty, are all kind of going through these golden ages and achieving and innovating and creating. And in Europe, it's just a whole lot of nothing. Trade declines, intellectual life recedes. Again, that's, you know, it's where you get that whole kind of, you know, the Dark Ages. That's what people are referring to, is that without the security and the stability of the Roman Empire, all of a sudden for a lot of Europeans, life is down to, you know, just trying to survive. And when that's your emphasis, then you don't have time to think about creating and innovating and inventing. You don't have, you know, time to think about, you know, just that, thinking and, you know, great thoughts and problem solving. You're trying to survive. That's what you're down to. And that's what was going on in a lot of Europe in that time frame. Okay. What we see as far as characterization is this example that you got in front of you here of decentralization. And feudalism is the name that we give to the political system that we're going to see in a number of parts of Europe. And pretty much as you can see here, this is going to be a system that it's going to be land-based, because again, we're going to be looking at a lot of agriculture in Europe. And is this concept of, and well, first of all, I'm getting ahead of myself. So feudalism, we can think of it. It's kind of a political, economic, cultural, even military system, okay, that is going to operate in these parts of Europe. And a lot of it is kind of this idea of almost kind of like land in exchange for loyalty, which you're going to have in a lot of these kingdoms. And some of these kingdoms go by the name of fiefdoms, okay, Fiefdoms, fiefdoms. And they operate these feudal systems. And it's kind of all based, kind of like the pyramid you see there, on kind of this sense of obligation. You've got peasants down at the bottom that work to help support knights. You have knights that work to support lords, and then all of them work to support the king up there at the top. And then it kind of works in reverse as well, where the king uses his power to protect the lords. They combined use their powers to protect the knights, and right on down to protecting the peasants. And so again, it's this kind of this, yeah, everyone's loyal to each other, everyone's working for each other, and that's what kind of makes the system work. Okay. Connected to that is the agricultural aspect of this, which is the manorial system that is created, and that's kind of what you see in the illustration down there in the bottom right. These agricultural estates that are formed up and are operated by serfs, SERFs, S-U-R-F-S, not serfs like the stuff at the ocean. And serfs are like slaves, but have a little bit more freedom. They're not, they might be bound to a landowner, but they're not bound in the way that slaves are, where they don't even have the freedom to leave. A serf can, in some cases, kind of work their freedom, and if they want to go and move off somewhere else and sell their services to another lord somewhere, another landowner somewhere else, oftentimes they can do that. So it's not quite has that permanent sound that slavery has to it. Okay, three-field system, crop rotation, things like that. I think regardless of whether you were with me in AP World, or excuse me, AP Hug or World Studies last year, we talked some about this, and this is around this time frame where a lot of these manners are figuring this out as a way of making sure that they don't exhaust the fields that they have and leave them in a state where they can no longer use them and plant them. And so it is that idea that you split your fields into either thirds or sometimes into fourths. I got 3-field system there, but sometimes they would do this in kind of a 4-field system. And every season you leave one of those fields alone. You just let it kind of go to what they call fallow. Basically let the weeds grow, and you utilize the other two to grow your crops. And then you rotate all of that. And basically what that does is it gives that 1/3 or that 1/4 of your growing fields a season to rest and regenerate, kind of get all their little nutrients kind of reloaded in there, and decreases that risk that you're going to wear out the soil to where it will no longer support the planting of crops. Something that is perfected in the manorial system. Okay, even though others in other parts of the world are also getting this system down. Europeans by no stretch are unique in the use of the rotation of crops. Okay, all right. What comes to be known as the High Middle Ages. No, it has nothing to do with people experimenting with substances or anything like that. This is kind of a period of the Middle Ages when we begin to see a bit of a rebound from the dark times, okay, from the Dark Ages or the medieval times. We start to see some changes. We're going to start to see the rise of monarchs, okay, these kings that are going to start to establish themselves, and are going to begin to combine some of those little feudal systems, some of those little feudal kingdoms together. And you're going to begin to see the formation of some of the countries that we're used to now seeing in Europe. And so the rise of England, the rise of France will be a couple of big ones. Eventually Spain will kind of jump in there. And you'll see the beginnings of these new countries that are starting to form up, led by these really strong kings, these monarchs. And most of these monarchies will end up being dynastic in nature. So, they're going to be established along a family line, that sort of thing. What's going to make these monarchies strong is going to be, first of all, yes, usually a strong and kind of inspiring, king at their head. But they're also going to make use of bureaucracies. Okay, they are going to do like we have learned others have done already before them, in terms of establishing all their different departments, having all of those different areas, of responsibility, and using that organization to help build a stronger and more stable centralized government. Okay, and then again the monarchies themselves are going to organize armies that are going to be able to, a lot of times the monarch, the king themselves, will personally control to help protect their bureaucracy, to help protect their kingdom, that sort of thing. All right. So again, strong guys. All right. So the major monarchies, go back in some of these I just mentioned to you. France and what will be called kind of the estates. And in France, with the establishment of France, you see their little symbol over there on the left side, the fleur de lis, and you notice there's 3 of them there, and those represent what come to be called the 3 estates. Okay, you world studies folks might remember this when we learned about the French Revolution last year, and the estates were the nobles, the clergy, people connected with religion, church, and then the third one was pretty much everyone else, the commoners. Okay, and so they kind of established that, and the estates are represented in their government, but they are headed up by a king. Okay, and eventually they'll get into the line of all the Louis and that family, the Bourbon family, that will operate the monarchy of France for many, 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 many years. All right. Let's see, the Holy Roman Empire. So not to be confused with the old Roman Empire, this is going to be kind of a smaller one that's going to form up. Will be relatively Catholic in terms of its faith, and actually is going to locate itself more in Central Europe. Part of it will be located in modern day France, but most of it is going to be located in modern day Germany. There is no Germany at this point in time. There's Germanic states that operate, but there is no Germany, okay? But that's kind of where they're going to locate themselves. And there'll be a little bit of this little growing power of their own. Oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of pictures coming up at once. Okay. Speaking of it, you have that big picture of that monarch up there above. And I still owe you this. I still have to get this in. Because you see that monarch holding in the one hand the staff with the crucifix on there, that symbol of his religious power. But then you also have that what's called the globus cruciger, that little globe, that little object in his other hand, and that has a little bit more of a political significance to it. It's kind of connected to his right to rule. I still prefer to go with the idea of it being the holy hand grenade. I still owe you that. Okay, we'll get that taken care of. But anyhow, those were the symbols of power. All right. So talked about France, talked about the Holy Roman Empire, England, which in the early days is referred to as Norman England, and that's going back to Normandy, okay, which is actually located in France. And Vikings, who came from Normandy originally to help establish what we think of modern day as England. But then over time, they will establish their own English monarchs, okay? And for a while, those monarchs will rule with kind of like absolute power and kind of get to call their own shots. But in 1215, the Magna Carta will be signed. And this is a representative of the English king pretty much signing away his right to absolute rule and agreeing to share power with the Parliament in England, which is kind of a little bit of their early on, kind of an early experiment in basically in representative government. And by signing the Magna Carta, the king is going to be allowing more rights and powers to wealthier, noble people in England. The Magna Carta is not going to do much for the common people of England. There'll be some changes that come along later for them. But it does help with the kind of really establishing Parliament, which will be split into two houses, just like we see here in our U.S. Congress. They'll have a House of Lords, which is operated by the noblemen of England, and then the House of Commons, which is still going to be made up of wealthy landowning kind of people. But again, the British will kind of lead the way as far as being the first monarchy to kind of back away from the idea of a king having, these just absolute extreme powers, like we might still see going on in France, and to a lesser extent maybe in the Holy Roman Empire. Okay. All right. Moving along. Trying to keep up. We're at 13. Okay. We're doing good. All right. So, mentioned the Roman Catholic Church that did survive the fall of the Roman Empire. So, let's go back and revisit that. First of all, hey, look, a picture. No, let's go on with this. Hey, we already talked about that split, that divide that happens in the religion of Islam. Well, in 1054, we get what comes to be known as the Great Schism. That's how you pronounce that word. For those of you who are looking at schism, schism? No, schism, all right? And what does the word mean? It pretty much means split, divide, okay? A lot of this is going to come down to differences over how much power the Pope should have, all right? Those who are the strong adherents to the Roman Catholic Church say, hey, the Pope, that's the leader, that's the boss, that's the dude that's got, the keys to, the faith and all of that. And they believe that the Pope's powers should be not unlimited, but they should have a lot of power that they hold in their hands. There's going to be other Catholics, and many of them happen to be, geographically speaking, a little further away from Italy and from Rome and the Vatican, and they believe that the Pope has acquired too much power. And there's attempts to try to reconcile these two positions. It doesn't work. And so you end up with this split. Whoops, hold on, before I get in there, let me detail that split for you. You will continue to have a Roman Catholic Church. That is going to operate mainly in what I would call Western to Central Europe, okay, to include down into, Italy itself, where the church will be headquartered, okay. For a while, at one point, the church will kind of bounce its headquarters back up into France, but still, I'll kind of keep it all that. And then you're going to end up with a breakaway group, and they're going to establish what is called the Orthodox Church. And this will be more in kind of southeastern Europe into what we would nowadays see as Russia. Okay, and most of their ceremonies are going to be similar to the Roman Catholic Church. Go to an Orthodox Church mass, you're going to recognize a lot of the of the pretty much the ceremony that we follow in the Catholic Church. But there's going to be some little differences in there. But again, they don't see themselves as being subservient to the Pope. Is the big difference between the Orthodox Church and then the Roman Catholics who remain subservient to the Pope. Okay, there we go. All right, let's move it on and take a look at what the Catholic Church is doing. Primarily, now focus on the Roman Catholic Church and its role in Europe. They are seen as this kind of sponsors and promoters of education and the arts in Europe. The matter of fact, over time, and when we mention the Renaissance here, we'll get into this idea that some of the first universities that are established in Europe, the financial backing comes from the Catholic Church. And yeah, a lot of these universities, one of their primary goals is to act as kind of like seminaries. They're training priests, they're training officials who will be able to work within the faith and within the Catholic religion. Okay, the arts, the Catholic Church will pay artists to what they call patronage to pretty much produce works of art, whether it's painting, sculpture, that is reflective of the Catholic faith. All right, so they're being supportive of those things, and yeah, you get the advantage of then the idea of education and arts being established as kind of this foundational to the rise of Europe. Okay, let's see, church and state. We're going to see various levels of, okay, so do we have separation of church and state? Do we have them blended together? Do we have, kind of theocracy going on? And you are definitely going to see the Catholic Church meddling in the runnings of the state in many of these cases. In Italy, in the Holy Roman Empire for sure, to a lesser extent maybe in France, and so there still is going to be some of that separation that goes in there, but make no mistake of it, the Catholic Church is going to have a lot of influence in Europe, and a lot of that influence will spill over into politics and the running of states. Okay, it's not going to, in any case, is it going to be a pure theocracy? Because you're still going to have a little bit of some political division in there, right? But definitely, it's leaning in close. Monasticism. This kind of gets into the role that monks are going to play, monkhood, and then nuns as well. And you'll see them established throughout different parts of Europe. And the monastic system, really, that's kind of established as part of this. A lot of these, especially when we're going to focus on the monks specifically, are going to establish kind of these agricultural, sometimes farms. They are going to work as some of them as scribes. This is before the printing press, and so if you want a copy of a Bible, it's going to be hand copied. And a lot of times monks are trained in the art of writing, calligraphy, and so we'll spend a lot of their kind of seclusion, because a lot of these monks, they take on these vows of just, basically a life of seclusion and kind of silence and quiet and all that kind of thing. And so what are they doing? Yeah, they're copying Bibles that will then be sold, and then the money will be used towards the upkeep of the monks themselves and for the Catholic Church. Some of them act as farmers, and the produce that they are able to farm and sell, again, for their own upkeep, but also goes back to the Catholic Church. Some of them produce things like beer. Monks in Belgium to this day operate breweries that, same thing, the money that goes from the proceeds from the sale of ale and those kinds of things goes back to the church, right? And so you have that kind of a system going on as well. Contributes to the economy, and is another way of enmeshing the faith into the culture of the different countries where we see these monks and these nuns operating their places, their little these monasteries. Okay, all right. Moving it on, corruption and reform. All right, let's see. I got to pick up the pace here, folks. So over time, we're going to start to see some corruption begin to creep its way into the Catholic Church. A lot of this is going to come in the form of financial corruption. You're going to start to have some less than, I guess, some kind of unsavory priests and other officials of the Catholic Church that will they'll begin to sell off their services. What they call, hold on just a sec here. Sorry, I had a sneeze there. Well, kind of more like a cough, but it turned into a sneeze. Anyhow, so there was a practice that was kind of happening with some priests. I'm not the wide brush here, called indulgences. And pretty simple idea here, and that was that you could pay money to have sins forgiven. Okay, literally, I mean, you could live a horrible lifestyle, just be a complete sleaze bag, and then kind of slide an envelope with some cash across the table to a priest who would then forgive you for all of your horrible, terrible lifestyle that you're living, and you could go on with continuing it that way, and then just pay for more forgiveness further on. The guy you see pictured on the left side, Martin Luther, who was a member of the Catholic Church. Began to really push back against this. He had a lot of issues. Another one of those, kind of like the Orthodox Christians who believed that the Pope was gaining too much power, those sorts of things. And so eventually he is going to break unity with the Catholic Church, and he will bring about what comes to be known as the Protestant Reformation. And Protestant, kind of from the word protest, he's protesting against the church, and will end up breaking away and forming up what will eventually basically be a new religion, a new religious faith called Protestantism. We'll go into a little more detail about this later on, and so I'm not going to completely go jumping into all of it, and a little bit more about Martin Luther's, his philosophy about religion and that sort of thing. Okay, all right. Moving on. I think we're going to make it. Okay. Let's see. The Crusades. So this will be another kind of one of those little like turning points that goes on in Europe. This is going to be something that actually the Pope at the time, Pope Urban, he's going to, with the Protestant Reformation going on, he's going to realize that the Catholic faith is a little bit under attack, and he's looking for a way to kind of rally everyone together, and and in the end, what better way than to pretty much kind of, I don't know, I mean, in a way, it's almost like get a war going, okay, for lack of a better way of putting it. It's a reality that at this time frame, that if you go down to the Middle East, Jerusalem was in the hands of Dar al-Islam. Okay, it had been taken by Islamic armies many years before, and Jerusalem has this powerful connotation and connection to Christianity, to Catholics, and so Urban makes this proclamation that Jerusalem and the Holy Lands should be under the control of Christians. And pretty much tells people, let's get into some of this, and tells people that if they will march down to the Holy Lands, that they will be rewarded by, again, kind of almost that same idea with the indulgences, forgiveness of sins, almost kind of like this guarantee that you'll go to heaven when you die, those sorts of things. Okay, so there's a political motivation to this in that the Catholic Church is trying to create a little bit of a distraction, so that it takes some of the heat off of them, and some of the complaints and some of the criticisms of the church. Okay. And also the church is worried about some of these new leaders, that these new monarchs that are potentially challenging the power of the Catholic Church. And so, this is seen as a way of trying to bypass all of those. Okay. There's also economic motivation, and that is that Europeans see the potential for what will come to be known as Crusades as opening up trade, a little bit more trade. That's what's going on between Europe and the Middle East, and then potentially from there on to Asia. Trade at this early point on is just coming in at a trickle during the high Middle Ages. There still is not much, and so there's the belief that this could kind of loosen things up if Christians, Europeans, have control over parts of the Middle East. That will kind of free up trade flowing into Europe. Okay. And so there will be a series of crusades that will be fought. Jerusalem at one point in time will be, actually a couple times, will be in the hands of Christians, but then the Muslims will regroup and come back and recapture. And when the crusades all told come to an end after about 100 years, Jerusalem and the Holy Lands are still under the control of Muslims. They allow Christians to hang around if they want. They got to pay taxes, an extra tax for doing so. But the bigger picture of the Crusades, the main goal, is not achieved. Okay, what is achieved is going to be almost a tradition of mistrust, distrust between Christians and Muslims, some elements of which last to this very day. From the conflict that these two groups have fighting over the Holy Lands. Okay, that's your Crusades. And then from there, a quick look, and a lot of this, again, I'm going to go kind of quick over it because we'll revisit some of this. Okay, so we're going to have, as far as some of this economic and social change going on through the High Middle Ages, we'll have a little bit of this, what we call these travelers. Who are going to go out and be able to travel around and come back and tell stories about what they see. Marco Polo will be a very famous one. He's going to eventually make it all the way to China and come back and write about what he sees. This is going to spark some European interest in Asia, which had been non-existent pretty much up to that point. And so, yeah, you get some of that going on, okay? Some interest in what potentially could, be trade coming out of there. You're going to see the rise of a middle class in Europe during the High Middle Ages and kind of going through this era of the Crusades and the Protestant Reformation. And so as, merchant class and things like that are beginning to become more and more important. The importance of commerce, the importance of more and more people beginning to urbanize and live in cities. You're going to see this going on, okay? Matter of fact, hey, that's my next one, urban growth. Agriculture is still going to be king, all right? Farming is going to be massive. It's going to employ far more people, but you're going to start seeing this shifting going on. From 1300 to 1800 is what they call the Little Ice Age, and it does put a little bit of pressure on the farming because you're going to have a lot of years in there where the farming is going to struggle a bit, and that's going to push some people into some of the bigger urban centers to look for different kinds of work opportunities. Okay, it's also going to be that urbanization that will a little later on here, again, something we'll hit again, is going to help to trigger the Black Death, the bubonic plague, people living in close proximity to each other and passing germs, bacteria, that kind of thing on to each other. Okay, we will also see when we talk about social change, the first real appearance of anti-Semitism Jewish people who had been scattered into Europe after the Romans marched in and basically took their promised land from them. Wherever the Jewish people are in Europe, find themselves a minority just because of their faith. And so anti-Semitism, this term that we use to refer to this kind of this discrimination of this even as extreme as hatred of Jews, we see appearances of this early on in the Middle Ages, where in some cases where they are expelled from urban centers, from cities, told you just cannot live there. There'll be some cases where there are Jews that are hunted down and killed because of their faith. Some real extreme situations like that. Okay, so you have that going on. Let's see here. I'm just at 30 minutes. I'm getting close. I'm going to go a little bit over, but hey, we're going to be done. Okay. We're also going to start to see more and more of this Muslim, kind of slowly growing Muslim influence into parts of Europe. We already have some down in Spain from that stretch of Dar al-Islam. Now we're also going to see some down in the southeastern parts of Europe as well. So again, little on the edges, some of that Muslim presence beginning to make itself known in Europe. All right. Women's roles, oh boy. No, sorry. It's going to be bad news for women in Europe during this stretch of time. They're going to see any political power they may have. No, it's pretty much non-existent. Rights that they're going to have, pretty much non-existent. The patriarchy is in full bloom during this stretch of time, all right, when we talk about Europe. So, sorry, ladies. It's just the way it is. I didn't make it up. I'm just reporting it, okay? All right. And then we're going to finish with the Renaissance. This is going to be something that will take place after the end of the Middle Ages, okay, the Dark Ages, and Renaissance, rebirth, kind of this blooming of culture and knowledge in Europe after all these years of kind of, again, Europe being this backwater. It leans heavily back on the influences of the Greeks and the Romans, and kind of there's this revival in interest in their thoughts, their ideas, their philosophies, their approaches to government, their approaches to literature, all of that. Remember, the Europeans wouldn't have a lot of that old Greek thoughts and writings and philosophy if Muslims hadn't translated it. And so now they take those Arabic texts, translate them into their various European languages, and boom, they have access to this, okay? If the Muslims don't do it, who knows? Maybe that Greek stuff is just lost to history. During the Renaissance, you're going to see the rise of even more so of a middle class. You're going to see more prosperity begin to be a reality. In other words, more people who are being able to make a living, people who have those specialized skills. And are able to turn that into a life that's more than just an existence in the struggle for life and death. Okay, what else do we have going on? I guess part of somewhere in there I should throw in. It's going to be during the Renaissance era, 1439, that Gutenberg is going to invent the printing press. And that will contribute to a rise in literacy going on in Europe as well. I don't know why I don't have that written down, but oh well. Humanism and secularism. Humanism is kind of this new focus. We a lot of times attach Leonardo da Vinci, kind of this Renaissance man, to humanism, and it's this focus on the pretty much the potential of humans. And it's kind of a step towards what we call secularism, which is a focus on life that steps away from the importance of religious faith. It's not a rejection of it. It's just saying there's other aspects of life that aren't always centered completely and totally around religious faith. That's a little bit of a shift away from the Middle Ages. Back during the dark times, people really clung to faith. They needed it to try to, have some hope to get through those basically those centuries where things just were grim and dark. And so now that things are beginning to turn a corner, that's where we see a little bit more of the secularism taking hold in various parts of Europe. Okay. And again, just keep in mind, like I said, not a rejection of religion, just more of this idea that religion may be part of our life, but there's other parts of our lives as well. Okay. And again, there's the kind of idea, individual where, balance between our individual self and our religious self and all those sorts of things. Okay, the Southern Renaissance, this is where the Renaissance, where most people think of it. You go and, man, when I was in Italy about 8 years ago, and, cities like Florence and, Rome itself, Venice, wow, I mean, you were walking through the heart of the Renaissance. I think we call it the Southern Renaissance, and really it is that part of it that is attached to Italy, where you have those artists like Botticelli and Da Vinci and Michelangelo, doing their thing. Okay, and a lot of them, good examples of that church patronage. Michelangelo is a perfect example. The Catholic Church, it pays for this guy. I mean, housing, food, basically pays him his life. And in exchange, he produces works like the David, the censored statue you see up there. And that is David from, the Bible. He paints the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, which is just, one biblical story after another after another. That's that patronage where, he's producing the art, but, it's the Catholic Church that's paying him. And so the art that he creates is all reflective of the faith. Okay. The Northern Renaissance is up in, we're talking about more like Holland, Netherlands, up in that area. And they will be a little bit more centered on humanism, where the Southern Renaissance is going to be more focused on Catholicism and religion. Okay, so a little bit of some differences there. And from there, where do we take it? Hopefully we take it. There we go. Okay, so 36 minutes. All right, guys, we'll call it close enough. Okay, but there you go. You got Unit 1 complete. And 1 down, 8 to go. Yay. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.